The Poisoned Inheritance and the Rise of Agrippina, the fate of the Roman Empire, and indeed the world, was often decided not on the battlefield but in the poisoned, candlelit chambers of the imperial palace. Our story begins not with the Emperor Nero himself, but with the woman who engineered his ascent, his mother, Agrippina. The younger, she was a descendant of Augustus, a woman of ruthless ambition, and a survivor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty's darkest purges. Born into the chaos of the imperial family, Agrippina was a political animal shaped by necessity. She witnessed the murderous reign of her brother, Caligula, and the suspicion of her uncle, Claudius. She understood that in Rome, power was not inherited. It was seized, manipulated, and secured through blood ties. Agrippina's only goal was to see her son, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, Nero's birth name, sit on the throne. Nero was born into luxury, but raised in exile and danger after his mother was banished by Caligula. This early life instilled in him both a sense of profound entitlement and a deep-seated paranoia, characteristics that would eventually define his rule. The opportunity for Agrippina arrived when she successfully charmed her uncle, the Emperor Claudius, into marrying her. Claudius, aging and easily manipulated, was convinced to adopt the young Nero, effectively placing him in line for the succession ahead of Claudius's own biological son. This was Agrippina's masterstroke. The adoption was solidified by a magnificent ceremony, shifting the political landscape overnight. To ensure Nero's smooth transition to power, Agrippina systematically removed potential threats and established a powerful inner circle for her son. She recalled two vital figures from exile: Lucius Seneca, the celebrated Stoic philosopher, who would become Nero's private tutor and advisor, and Sextus Afranius Burrus, the disciplined Praetorian prefect, who commanded the emperor's personal guard. Seneca would shape Nero's mind with philosophy and rhetoric, while Burrus would control the only military force that mattered in Rome. The stage was set, but Claudius remained an obstacle, particularly as he began to favor Britannicus as he grew older. Agrippina knew time was short. In 54 AD, the elderly Claudius mysteriously died after eating a plate of poisoned mushrooms, reputedly served by Agrippina herself. The moment Claudius was dead, Agrippina acted with cold, precise efficiency. She immediately secured the Praetorian Guard's loyalty through Burrus and proclaimed Nero as the new emperor before the Senate could debate the succession. Nero was just 16 years old. In his first speech to the Senate, penned by Seneca, he promised a return to the virtues of Augustus, pledging to rule with clemency and respect for the Senate. The first 5 years of his rule, often called the Quinquennium Neronis, were surprisingly peaceful and prosperous, largely because the reins of power were held firmly by the trio Agrippina, Seneca, and Burrus. But the young emperor was a powder keg, waiting for a match. He was a student of the arts, a talented lyre player, and a writer, craving recognition for his artistic rather than his political talents. This yearning for public performance clashed violently with his mother's rigid, controlling ambition. Agrippina expected to rule. She attended Senate meetings and even appeared on the back of his coins. This power-sharing arrangement created an unbearable tension that defined the start of Nero's reign. The son would soon chafe against the dominance of the mother who created him. Mother against son, the matricide, and the price of freedom. The power struggle between Nero, the reluctant emperor, and Agrippina, the relentless mother, could not last. The Quinquennium Neronis, the era of clemency, managed by Seneca and Burrus, was built on a lie: the subservience of the emperor. As Nero reached his 20s, his artistic desires clashed violently with his mother's rigid political control, and his suppressed resentment began to curdle into hatred. Nero's first major act of defiance was personal. Agrippina intended for him to marry a woman who would cement a political alliance. Instead, Nero became deeply infatuated with Claudia Acta, a former slave and palace attendant, Agrippina, was furious, publicly insulting the emperor's choice and asserting her dominance. This love affair became a symbol of Nero's desperate need to escape his mother's control. The stakes were fatally raised at a banquet. Agrippina, leveraging her lingering influence, began subtly promoting Britannicus, the late Emperor Claudius's biological son, reminding everyone that Nero was merely adopted. Nero understood the implicit threat. Britannicus was poisoned shortly thereafter during a feast. Tacitus records that Nero watched with chilling indifference as the boy collapsed, simply explaining to the guests that Britannicus suffered from an epileptic seizure. This cold, calculated murder was Nero's political baptism. He had crossed the final threshold into ruthlessness, proving he was willing to kill his own family to secure his place. But Agrippina remained the ultimate, suffocating obstacle. Nero, now obsessed with the idea of marrying his mistress, Poppaea Sabina, realized his mother would never allow it. He conceived a plan so shocking and audacious that it immediately entered Roman legend. He would kill his mother by means of a naval accident. The plan was enacted during a spring festival nearby. Agrippina was invited to board a specially constructed Gallia luxury vessel, designed to fall apart in the open water. The collapsible roof, weighted with lead, was meant to crush her, while the ship's engineered disintegration was meant to drown her quietly. As the ship sailed, the mechanism failed to kill her outright. The ship collapsed, drowning her attendants, but Agrippina, a strong swimmer, managed to stay afloat and was rescued by a passing fishing vessel. Agrippina was injured, but alive. She returned to her villa, sending word to Nero that she had survived the accident. Nero, terrified by his mother's impossible survival and realizing the horrific nature of his plot would soon be public, panicked, he immediately summoned Burrus and Seneca, demanding they finish the job. Both advisors, though complicit in Nero's power, hesitated. Ordering the matricide of an Augusta was a step too far. However, when Nero threatened to reveal that they had known of the plot all along, Burrus finally dispatched a tribune and several centurions to Agrippina's villa. When the soldiers entered her chamber, Agrippina immediately understood her fate. She reportedly told the centurion to strike her in the womb, the very source of the son, who now demanded her death. Nero's reign of terror had officially begun. In a desperate attempt to contain the scandal, he claimed that Agrippina had plotted his assassination and committed suicide when discovered. The Roman people, initially relieved that the highly controlling empress was gone, soon saw the truth behind the emperor's nervous, guilty facade. With the woman who created him finally dead, Nero believed he was free, unaware that his first act of true political freedom would ultimately lead to his own self-destruction. The stage and the serpent, art, adulation, and the fall of the guards. With his mother's body cold in the grave, Nero believed he had achieved absolute freedom. The restraints of the quinquennial Nerones were gone, replaced by the full-blown, unchecked obsession of a teenager suddenly given infinite power. Rome expected a stern, traditional ruler. Instead, they received an emperor obsessed with the theater, Greek athletics, and public adulation activities considered shameful and degrading for a Roman noble. Nero embraced the stage. He started performing privately, then moved to public venues, demanding that the Senate and the Vestal Virgins attend his endless poetry readings, lyre concerts, and chariot races. This was deeply offensive to the Roman aristocracy, who viewed participation in public games as utterly beneath the dignity of the imperial office. Nero was not just defying tradition. He was actively humiliating the elite, who were forced to sit for hours and offer a false praise. The greatest new influence on Nero's life was Poppaea Sabina, a woman renowned for her beauty, ambition, and ruthlessness, a stark contrast to Nero's dutiful but dull wife, Octavia. Poppaea, unlike Agrippina, used subtle flattery rather than coercion, expertly feeding Nero's ego and encouraging his artistic excesses. She saw the potential in his madness and became his primary confidant, quickly becoming the most powerful woman in Rome, and demanding that Nero divorce Octavia to marry her, to secure Poppeia's position and fully realize his artistic vision. Nero needed to remove the last political barriers. The first to fall was Sextus Afranius Burrus, the Praetorian prefect and the military check on the emperor. In 62 AD, Burrus suddenly and suspiciously died, likely from poison. With Burrus gone, Nero replaced him with two men, Vainius Rufus, who lacked influence, and, crucially, Tigellinus, a man notorious for his cruelty and complete loyalty to Nero's vices. Tigellinus was the ruthless enforcer Nero needed to fully realize his tyrannical tendencies. The death of Burrus marked the final nail in the coffin of the old guard. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who had guided Nero's education and moderated his rule, now found himself powerless. His philosophical lectures were useless against the intoxicating flattery of Poppaea and the dark protection of Tigel. Seeing the unstoppable descent of his former student into madness, Seneca wisely retreated from public life, offering his immense fortune back to Nero and requesting permission to retire. Though Nero initially refused the fortune, Seneca effectively ended his involvement in governance, leaving the 25-year-old emperor completely unchecked. With the political and military restraints removed, Nero moved to consolidate his domestic life. Yielding to Poppeia's demands, Nero divorced his virtuous wife, Claudia Octavia, on the grounds of barrenness. Octavia, beloved by the Roman people and a symbol of the stable Claudius dynasty, was banished. This callous act, driven purely by lust and ego, was deeply unpopular with the populace. Nero's rule was no longer merely eccentric. It was becoming actively cruel. The emperor was ready to commit his next, most shocking murder, setting the stage for the greatest disaster Rome had ever known. The Empress of Ice and the Art of Cruelty. Nero's decision to banish his virtuous wife, Octavia, to satisfy the ambitions of Poppaea was met with unprecedented public outrage. Octavia, the last true symbol of the beloved Claudius dynasty, was immensely popular when the Roman populace took to the streets, tearing down statues of Poppaea and demanding Octavia's immediate return. Nero saw it not as a display of grief, but as an act of treason against his imperial will. Encouraged by Poppaea, who feared the public's enduring affection for the former empress, Nero decided to silence the unrest with a final, chilling act of brutality. He fabricated a charge of adultery against Octavia, forcing a divorce. When the people still cried out for her, Nero escalated the lie, claiming she had been party to a failed conspiracy. The ensuing execution was a political declaration of tyranny. Octavia was bound and executed, and her severed head was sent back to Rome as a gift for the newly triumphant Poppaea. This act marked a decisive psychological shift in Nero's reign. He was no longer merely eccentric or volatile. He was a calculated killer, willing to spill the blood of the innocent to serve his personal desires. The Roman people understood their beloved republic was dead, replaced by a tyranny driven by vanity and fear. With Octavia gone, Nero finally married Poppaea Sabina. In 62, she became empress, a position she had manipulated and schemed to attain. Her influence only amplified Nero's worst tendencies, encouraging his belief that he was a divinely inspired genius. Nero began to see himself less as a Roman statesman and more as a Greek god, a manifestation of Apollo, the god of music, light, and poetry. This intense self-worship led to monumental vanity projects. Nero began the construction of the Domus Transitoria, the Transitional Palace, a vast, sprawling complex designed to connect the existing imperial residences across Rome's hills. The project required enormous expenditure and the demolition of existing structures, creating resentment among the plebeians and the Senate alike. Nero viewed the city not as a capital to be governed, but as a stage and canvas for his own artistic genius. His obsession culminated in the decision to undertake a massive public tour of Greece, where he intended to compete in the Olympic Games and other festivals. To a Roman, participating in public games was a disgrace. To Nero, it was his true destiny. He believed that his artistic achievements would forever overshadow his political duties. This grand artistic ambition, fueled by unchecked power and the absence of any moral compass, left Rome vulnerable and neglected. The Emperor, who cared more about the perfect performance of a Lyre solo than the administration of his sprawling empire, had unknowingly set the stage for a catastrophe that would redefine his reign and burn his name into the annals of history forever. The city was dry, crowded, and ripe for disaster. The Inferno, fire, the Lyre, and the Scapegoat. In July of 64 AD, the city of Rome, neglected and dry from the emperor's artistic distractions, became the victim of its own density. A catastrophic fire erupted in the commercial area near the Circus Maximus, fueled by wood structures, strong winds, and the narrow, winding alleys of the city. The blaze quickly became an inferno of unimaginable scale. The fire raged, uncontrolled, for 6 days and 7 nights, consuming 2/3 of the city, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless and entire districts reduced to smoking ruins. Though historical records suggest Nero was in Antium when the fire began, he rushed back to Rome and initiated seemingly responsible relief efforts. He opened his own palaces to the homeless and imported emergency grain supplies. Yet, this initial good work was completely overshadowed by a single, damning legend. It was widely claimed that, as the city burned, Nero stood on a tower, dressed in theatrical garb, playing his lyre and reciting his own poem about the sack of Troy. The emperor, who had always craved the dramatic, had finally achieved his ultimate tragic stage, regardless of the reality. Public suspicion of the emperor quickly solidified into conviction. The question on every Roman's tongue was not how the fire started, but who started it. The accusation gained undeniable traction when Nero immediately announced his plan to build the Domus, the Golden House, e Magnificento, sprawling palace and pleasure park that would occupy the vast tracts of cleared land in the heart of the devastated city. To the Senate and the populace, this was proof. Nero had deliberately cleared Rome by fire simply to construct a monument to his own limitless ego. Faced with mounting public fury and the threat of widespread revolt, Nero and his chief advisor, the ruthless prefect Tig, recognized the desperate need to deflect the blame. The anger had to be channeled, and a scapegoat had to be found, one that was already unpopular, marginal, and easy to dehumanize. Their choice fell upon the Christians. This small, newly established religious sect was misunderstood by the populace. Their secret meetings, refusal to worship the Roman gods, and talk of the world's end made them easy targets for the public's fear and hatred. What followed was a campaign of persecution of unparalleled brutality. Christians were rounded up and subjected to horrific tortures to force confessions. Tacitus recorded the most shocking details. Many were covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified, and the most notorious punishment saw them coated in pitch and set alight to serve as living torches to illuminate Nero's own garden parties at night. Nero had saved himself from public execution, but only by transforming into a monster. By shedding the blood of the innocent, he had bought time, but the moral fabric of the empire was irreparably torn. The fire and the subsequent terror did not stabilize his reign. They only further convinced the Roman elite that their emperor was dangerous, unstable, and had to be removed. The Pisonian Conspiracy and the Reign of Terror. The year 65 AD marked the true descent of Nero into unchecked terror. The rebuilding of Rome was expensive. The persecution of Christians was cruel, and the emperor's ongoing obsession with his artistic career left the state. The Roman elite, terrified of being next on Tigellinus's list of scapegoats, realized that only Nero's death could save the Republic. This shed fear culminated in the Pisonian Conspiracy, the largest and most ambitious plot ever launched against Nero, led by the popular senator Gaius Calpurnius Piso. The plot was remarkably diverse, involving senators, knights, poets, and, crucially, high-ranking officers in the Praetorian Guard, including the co-prefect Faenius Rufus. The plan was simple. Assassinate Nero during the circus games and proclaim Piso as the new emperor. But like many Roman conspiracies, it was ruined by an act of cowardice. Just before the plot could be executed, a freedman leaked details to Nero. The emperor, who lived in perpetual paranoia, reacted with blinding speed and absolute brutality. Tigellinus was unleashed to conduct a massive, sweeping investigation based on torture, fear, and unreliable testimony. The ensuing purge systematically destroyed the intellectual and moral center of Rome. Many distinguished figures were arrested and granted the mercy of Roman custom that allowed one to die with honor, avoiding public execution. Among the most tragic casualties was Seneca. Though he had long been retired, his name was implicated in the conspiracy. Seneca received the order to die with stoic calm. He opened his own veins in a famous, drawn-out scene, delivering final philosophical lessons to his students, even as his lifeblood flowed away. The death of Seneca symbolized the complete demise of any moral constraint on Nero's rule. The purge continued mercilessly. The great poet Lucan was forced to commit suicide. Petronius, the elegant arbiter of taste, who had guided Nero's debauchery, wrote a scathing satire detailing Nero's depravities before opening his veins. Piso himself died quickly. By the time the executions ended, Nero had eliminated most of the Senate's influential opposition, leaving only sycophants and terrified survivors. Nero had consolidated his power, but at the cost of his own sanity and the respect of the world. He was now utterly isolated, surrounded only by the creatures who served his tyranny. In 66 AD, completely convinced of his own invincibility and divine protection, Nero embarked on his long-delayed, triumphant tour of Greece. He forced the postponement of the Olympic Games and insisted on participating in every athletic and artistic competition, winning thousands of manufactured crowns. While Nero was busy celebrating his victories on the Greek stage, he was completely blind to the fact that the Roman military, the one force he truly needed, was finally turning against him. The revolts in the western provinces were beginning, and the emperor would soon run out of places to hide. The final act, the deserter, the coward, and the artist's death. While Nero was crowning himself victor in every manufactured artistic contest in Greece, the Roman Empire was collapsing behind him. The revolts that would finally end his reign began in the provinces, far from his stage lights. Gaius Iudius Vindex, the governor of Gaul, raised his banner, protesting Nero's tyrannical taxes. He was soon joined by Savius Sulpicius Galba, the powerful governor of Hispania. This time, it was not a palace conspiracy, but a military crisis. Nero's reaction was characterized by shocking denial and hubris. Upon receiving news of the revolts, he reportedly dismissed them as mere annoyances, more concerned with securing the last of his Greek artistic prizes than commanding his legions. He rushed back to Rome only when the situation became dire. But even then, his primary focus was preparing a theatrical musical defense convinced his artistry could charm the rebellious forces. The decisive moment came in June 68. Galba's agents successfully bribed the Praetorian Guard, the very soldiers who had protected Nero since his accession. With the Praetorian prefect Nymphidius Sabinus promising a massive cash bonus, the Guard publicly withdrew its loyalty from Nero. When the emperor awoke, he found himself utterly alone. His palace was deserted, his servants and soldiers had vanished, and even the loyal Tigellinus had abandoned him. In a state of desperate panic, Nero fled the city in disguise, accompanied only by a few loyal freedmen and his private secretary, Epaph. He rode to a villa outside the city, where he hid in a secluded service room, listening in terror as the Senate, empowered by the Praetorian Guard's betrayal, finally declared him a hostis publicus on enemy of the state. This declaration meant he was stripped of all legal protection and could be hunted and executed without trial. The artistic tyrant, who had callously ordered the agonizing deaths of his mother, his wife, and his philosopher, now proved utterly incapable of committing the simplest act of suicide. He begged his companions to set an example, to show him how to die honorably. but no one moved. He held the dagger to his throat, but his nerve failed. He wished that he had not yet learned how to kill himself. As he hesitated, they heard the hoofbeats of the pursuing cavalry approaching the villa. Knowing they would drag him back to Rome for a public execution, Nero finally understood his fate. Shamed into action, he plunged the dagger into his neck with the assistance of a His last, pathetic words of final lament that encapsulated his entire tragic reign were, Qualis artifex pu. What an artist dies in me. Nero died at the age of 30, marking the end of the mighty Julio-Claudian dynasty founded by Augustus. Rome had rid itself of its tyrant, but the chaos that followed immediately plunged the empire into the year of the 4 emperors. The man who sang while his capital burned left behind a legacy of tyranny, fire, and a haunting question. What happens when the art of power is eclipsed by the power of art?